You are listening to the After the Timeout podcast, hosted by Todd Zazadil and Jon Pilicki, two high school head coaches looking to help others spread their passion for the game of basketball. Tune in for episodes about anything basketball related, on the court, off the court, and anything in between. We at the After the Timeout podcast would like to take a full time out to talk about VREPS basketball. Coaches, do you get frustrated by how some players just cannot seem to learn your offensive system? Are you spending countless hours teaching your offensive system to your team just for them to forget by the next practice? You should check out VREPS. VREPS was founded by basketball players and coaches to create tools that make learning plays easily a reality. VREPS allows coaches to turn their 2D playbook into a 3D interactive video game that players can watch on any mobile device on their own time. Don't just have players watch film, have them live it and control the players so that they have a better, more efficient learning experience. It's free to try. Go to vreps.us to sign up today.
On today's episode, it's awesome to have Coach Bobby Frasor on. He's the head coach of Brother Rice High School boys basketball program. Coach, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Appreciate you guys having me.
So we wanted to kind of just start with your playing career, okay? And you obviously went to North Carolina. But what was the biggest transition for you from playing at the high school level, and obviously you played at a very high level, to the Division I level at North Carolina?
Yeah, I still remember it vividly when I got on campus. McDonald's All-American, you're a really good high school player, have this really good career, then you get there and we're playing like open gyms with, whether it may be Raymond Felton or David Noel or Rayshon Terry, some of these guys. And I remember just how quick everything was. And I tell that to our guys now, like how every level you go up, freshman to sophomore, college, high school to college, whatever, like everything just gets a little bit quicker. But I just remember like being like, I can't guard these guys. I can't get by these guys. It was like almost, like shocking to a certain extent. I remember going to the strength coach being like, hey, I got to get stronger, I got to get faster, I got to get quicker. And he's, just like, hey, it takes time and stuff. And playing against those guys then for 4 years and guarding high level players like that for 4 years, you figure it out and you get better. But I just remember the strength, the quickness, the size of people. That was just super, super eye opening.
So let's kind of transition to, I'm going to ask you kind of a two-parter because I'm curious because you played for two of maybe the best basketball coaches in the history of basketball, between Coach Williams and Coach Richardson. So, what are things that both Coach Williams and Coach Richardson did that, you kind of took when you first started? And, what are those things that you continue to use to this day?
Yeah, well, I guess going back to the playing side of it, I was very lucky. So Coach Richardson, when he was, building his program, and he was touring all these schools and seeing what he liked and what he didn't like. And he really liked the secondary breaks from, Kansas when he would go to practices and stuff and see what Coach Williams was doing there. And so I was very fortunate from a playing standpoint to run all these secondary breaks and stuff like that and kind of get that feel and that organization and that flow in high school. And, it kind of seamlessly transitioned and allowed me to start as a freshman point guard at North Carolina, which not many people do. So that was one thing, just kind of not related to your question, that I always remember being beneficial for my, college career. But as far as taking what those two have taught me into, my basketball program, I get, Coach Richardson was absolutely fantastic with details. He could talk about 15 feet spacing in your offense and the way your back is pointed and when you're setting a screen. And, he's just so detailed in his motion offense. And so I've always envied that because, he was so good, but it was very cut and dry, what the players were supposed to do. We would watch film before huddle and all this. Before it was so easy, he's cutting VHSs up and things like that. And we're sitting in his office watching films, and he's got detailed notes on, certain plays, and you know, that's something that I'll always try to do, is be as prepared, you know, as he was. You know, when it comes to Coach Williams, I think Coach Williams he doesn't get enough credit for being a good motivator. Just, you know, kind of this whole encompassing of running a program. Everybody kind of rags him because he does the same thing year after year after year, but it's like he's throwing a fastball, you know, 100 miles per hour and saying, hey, come hit it. But just his ability to be loyal to players, to connect with players. You know, you kind of take those pieces from him and try to implement them and be as you know, influential in some of these high school kids that I'm fortunate enough to coach now. But yeah, it's pretty cool that both those guys I can pick up the phone and shoot a text to or call and be able to bounce ideas off of. You know, we hit a big win this season over Fenwick, kind of a buzzer beater, hit a shot with about 5-6 seconds left. And, you know, he texted me after the game because one of my buddies is still on staff and showed him the highlight. And he texted me, you know, after the game, congratulate me and stuff like that. So just stuff like that's pretty cool. And again, unbelievable coaches that I was very fortunate enough to play and learn from.
So obviously, I'm sure people know that you won a national title, right, when you were in North Carolina. Obviously, you have to.
People forget quickly. Like, someone asked me the other day, and I was like, yeah, we were probably 27 years apart or something, or 17.
I guess maybe the younger guys, right? But that's guys of my age kind of know, especially our Chicago guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, you have tremendous talent, right? And I think every championship, you need a little luck here and there, right? Ball bounces your way. But just in general, what do high-level championship teams possess that separates them from the rest of the teams, maybe in their state, right? If it's a high school team or just the country.
Yeah, you said it first. Obviously, you need talent. Like that's you know, whatever. That's what you first need. But once you have the talent, obviously there's a lot of talented teams around the country that don't win championships, that don't win, you know, as many games as they're supposed to be. And I think a lot of that comes back to just enjoying each other, or being good teammates, or, you know, wanting to support your teammate, or you don't want to get beat or miss your defense assignment because it's going to hurt someone else, or if someone else gets beat, you want to be there to protect the rim or rotate over, whatever you may need to do. And so that's kind of what I think about with our national championship team. Is like, yeah, you're not going to be best friends with, you know, all 15 guys on the team, but you know, top to bottom, 1 through 15, those are all high character guys that I, you know, loved being around on a daily basis. We would laugh in practice. We had so much fun. We enjoyed being around each other. And I think that adds to your performance on the court. So, you know, if teams are hanging out, and, you know, enjoy each other and can laugh and joke with each other, like, I think it's just going to translate to more success and more buy-in, I guess, on the court.
So I want to flip that now to the coaching side. You know, you have a talented team. You have a collection of talent, right? How, as a coach, do you help facilitate what you just talked about, the blending of the team and everybody enjoying getting together and kind of combining all that talent and all those intangibles?
Yeah, I think you can do a mix of things. That every summer, like when we end summer camp, you know, we have 20, 25 contact days in June. I like to go to whether it's a field, maybe we'll do softball. We've done a game called Danny Ball that I stole from Carolina. That it's a med ball. Basically, we play 3-on-3, and you're throwing that over a volleyball net. It's an unbelievable, you know, workout, but also guys get super competitive into it, and you can, you know, make your bracket and make tournaments and do fun stuff like that. I think all those little competitive things, you know, really allows you to put guys in different teams, put them with different people that they may not be hanging out with, and they can see how they compete and can win and have fun with each other. And I think that just allows people to learn more about, you know, their teammates.
So Todd and I like to do our homework, and something I had read was when you first started your coaching career, you kind of wanted to be in the collegiate game, and you started kind of at North Carolina, then you kind of switched to UAB, and then you kind of took that hard right turn. Coach Richardson kind of stepped aside and you kind of stepped in. So what made you want to come back home? What made you want to coach at the high school level?
Yeah, I mean, so I got out of coaching altogether for a year. I took commercial real estate job down in North Carolina that, probably could have been very lucrative had I stayed in it, but I did it for about 8-9 months, and it just wasn't what I wanted. And then, the job opened up at Brother Rice, and I love Chicago. My whole family's here. Like, I knew eventually I wanted to be back and live in the city and do all that fun stuff. And so, took a jump at it. My dad obviously was a high school coach for 27, 30 years. And so, it was a little bit in my blood, but, kind of took a leap of faith, knowing that I loved Brother Rice. I loved my alma mater, but I didn't know how long I'd be there, what the future would hold. But I've been there 6 years now, and again, really enjoy the kids that we have. I think that's what makes it so much fun, is when you have a good group of kids and you can say, hey, practice is tomorrow at 8 a.m. or whatever, and everyone's going to be there, and you don't have to deal with a ton of headaches. It makes coaching a lot easier.
So that was actually going to be, you led in perfectly to my next question, which was about your dad. You had mentioned your dad coached for 27 years. Outside of obviously Coach Richardson and Coach Williams, I'm sure there were many life lessons you learned from your dad, obviously, outside of coaching, but in coaching. What were some of those things you learned growing up, just watching your dad or working with your dad? Or, I think any guy listening to this podcast learns things from their dad. So I'm just curious, what were things you learned from your dad about coaching and this career?
I learned all the 4-letter cuss words being involved in the locker room. That was my first experience. But no, I loved going to games. I loved going to practices. I loved being in the locker room. Like I said, the biggest thing I think with him is just his ability to relate to the guys and have, like, he would just have fun sometimes. Obviously, he was very hard and demanding and had good relationships. But I remember one time being in the gym, I'm probably like 5th or 6th or 7th grade or something, and he has the guys shooting free throws at the end of the practice, and he comes out of his office and he's sagging his pants, has his hat on, he's trying to distract the guy, just being funny and like not really caring about how he looks or being cool or something like that. And all the guys, they fall out laughing and stuff like that. And so I just think like that, kids really appreciate that. They can, makes you more human, to them, and they can approach you for some things like that. So I've always taken that humor, I guess, and that aspect of my dad, and try to implement that in different parts of the practice. Because again, if you're making a point about somebody's defensive stance or the way they dribble the basketball or something, and you're trying to teach them, you can still be humorous about it, and other guys will laugh, but they'll remember it. And so you take some of that, when you are critiquing guys, but again, I loved everything, being around Eisenhower and my dad's program and players and stuff, and being the ball boy. It was so much fun.
So I want to kind of go into your transition into head coaching. Obviously, I think, now everybody knows that when you become a head coach, you kind of learn some lessons, right? Because everybody usually loves the assistants, right? The assistants are the favorites. They know everything. And then you become a head coach, you know nothing, and you're kind of, you think you have it all figured out, but you don't. So when you first started as a head coach, what was your biggest challenge, first of all, and then kind of what did you learn that first year?
Biggest challenge, it's probably off the court stuff. It's like, at Rice, we have a freshman A and B team, sophomore, so you don't really realize this when, you're 20, I think I was 29, 28 when I got the job, and okay, you're in charge of all 3 levels, and that's 50 some kids, and okay, you got to order practice gear for everybody and do the bus schedule and all this. You just want to coach basketball, obviously, and that's what everybody wants to do, but you don't really think about all that other stuff that's involved in it. And so that was eye-opening to me, that first year, just trying to keep your head above water with, you want to do everything right. You want to have scouting reports, you want to do, film like you do in college, but then you start to realize like, oh, I don't have 3 full-time assistants that are getting paid, 6 figures or something. Like, we're getting lucky to get 4 figures in high school. So, so that then you just have to adjust and learn how to be the most efficient that you possibly can, by still giving the kids all the energy and effort that they deserve. But those were probably two of the biggest things. And then obviously, when you first start coaching, you want to do everything like Coach Richardson, or you want to do everything like Coach Williams, and you have to learn that like I'm starting doing stuff. I'm like, why am I doing this? I don't like this. And like, then you realize, okay, I'm the head coach. I can do whatever I want. If I want to do a press breaker this way, if I want to do an out of bounds play this way, like, so you don't have to be exactly those guys, even though they had so much success. You can kind of put your own fingerprints on the program and do things your way.
So that kind of leads into one of my follow-ups. You just talked about like doing things your own way, because we all play for certain people. You go through programs, you learn it a certain way. So what is, I guess, when you were going through that, what was the process for you of kind of taking things out and adding your own? Because I think that's an important part for anybody who's becoming a head coach and simplifying it and making it your own. How did you go through that process?
Like obviously at Carolina, we emphasize, or Coach Williams emphasized, getting the ball inside, and that helps when you have Tyler Hansbrough or Sean May, John Hen, like the list goes on and on of these big time Tyler Zeller, players that could score with their backs to the basket. They're 7 feet tall. It's a huge advantage getting the free throw line. Then you realize, you look at your high school team and you have a 6'1" center, and it's like, maybe we shouldn't be pounding the ball inside to that guy. So you learn quickly like that okay, it's not the same. And so I have to figure out what's going to be the best, way for us to score, the most effective way for us to score, and where we're going to have the most highest return. So we've obviously bombed it at Brother Rice. That's kind of what Coach Richardson had, and that's you look at the NBA game, it's trickling down, or it's just threes and layups and stuff. So we've kind of shifted to that. But then there's also things like I'm putting in a press break that we did at Carolina, and realizing, hey, this doesn't really make sense to have your 4-man up here. You should be able to way back that there. And so just little things like that you don't really think about as a player. When you're a player, you do everything the coach says. And you take it as gospel, like, oh, Coach Williams says this. Yes, that's the right thing to do. And then once you start thinking about it and putting that in, I was like, oh wait, we shouldn't do that here. And so those are just a couple examples coming on.
So you talked about your assistant coaches as well. And obviously none of us have a giant staff like a big time college program, but I always think it's interesting how different coaches use their assistant coaches, right? Because there's so many different styles, whether it be you have offensive coordinators, you have defensive coordinators, you have, so how do you go about using your offensive or your assistant coaches and involving them, and what is your kind of dynamic on the coaching staff?
I'd say the biggest thing, I don't really have defined like offensive guys and defensive guys. I feel like a lot of colleges are starting to go that route. For us, I just want them in practice, having a voice. I don't want it just to be me the whole time, but also then when they do have a voice, I want it to be, boom, boom, make your point. All right, let's keep the drill moving. Let's keep this going. From outside of that, from like a scouting and watching film, I love all their input. Like, hey, you take this game, tell me what you think. And that it's hard for me to ask them to do so much, just because I feel like even at a Catholic school, like stipends are so low. Like you guys know it from a time put in versus your hourly way. It's like pennies on the dollar. And so like for me to then say, hey, you got to do this, and this. I want this type of scouting report. Like I just feel almost bad asking someone to do that. So I try to take a lot of that on my plate as the head coach, as far as scouting and putting together a scouting report and matchups and things like that. But obviously they're on staff for a reason, and I value their input, and you want them making suggestions in practice or after practice or during games, or, hey, let's take a timeout here, or, maybe we should try this play or switch to zone, or, hey, he looks tired. Like you love all that stuff, and you want to say, have a little banter with your assistant coaches too. So that's just kind of how I've treated it.
So interesting question. We kind of talked about just in game and different things in the game. I always find it interesting, and we always have one as a coach, and most of us have more than one, but what's something you learned from a loss? Maybe earlier in your career, you learned something very specific after you lost, or maybe even recently.
early in my career, my first game ever, I think, was like a double overtime game. We ended up losing that game. And I don't think I had like a sideline 2-second, we had the ball left with like 2 seconds left. And I was like, I don't know. And like we didn't get a shot or didn't have something. It's like, yeah, maybe we would have won if we had that play, but we just weren't prepared or weren't organized in that. And so like now you make a list of whatever you need before you first, okay, we got to have press break. We got to have zone offense. We got to have this. And so like, I don't go into our first game of the year without having something like that, like whatever, just something that could be organized from a sideline out of bounds, 2 seconds left. So we need to get a shot off in a tight game. But that's one thing that comes to mind. And that was our first game ever. So I was like kind of thrown into the fire there.
All right. And then before we move on to kind of another topic. Now I'm just curious, what's a fun story? Whether it would be when you were a player in North Carolina or a Brother Rice or coaching in North Carolina or UAB or coaching at Brother Rice, what's a fun story for our listeners that they would enjoy? Now he's going through his stories like, okay, what can I tell? What can't I tell?
No, in college, like I can go through a million college stories. They're hysterical, and a lot of them involve Tyler Hansbrough because he's such a clown. Everybody thinks he's like this, this robot, and he's obviously a great, great player and warrior. But like one time, we were going out after a win or something like that, and he comes out in a full-length leather trench coat. Like I didn't know why he owned a full-length leather trench coat, but he acted like he was gonna wear this out, and I was like, look good. And my buddy Marcus is like, dude, go change. Like you're not wearing that out. Like we're not going out. So then he goes back into his room and comes back out with just a leather jacket, like not full length. It wasn't a trench coat. Then he just went leather, like half. It's like makes no sense. But that's one thing that comes to mind. From a coaching standpoint, like there's just a lot. You just like have a lot of fun being around the kids and. The video guy, like we had a video kid in one of my first or second year who would always miss a quarter or miss something. And so then we ended up winning a championship in a Christmas tournament. And he comes like speaking to the team, it's kind of dying down. Like he's like sneaks in the locker after he closes up the camera, call his name. I'm like, hey, did you get everything? And like, he's like, yeah. And then the whole team like erupts and we jump up and like celebrate in the middle of the room. Like he just won the championship again. So little stuff like that is fun that I remember. And hopefully those guys remember too.
Those are good. So let's kind of shift a little bit. You obviously played basketball after your college career, a little bit overseas, and we had Layson Perkins on recently, and we kind of asked him about the difference between overseas and U.S. ball. What were the big differences for you when you played overseas versus when you played in the United States?
The biggest thing at first was like if I'm right-handed, my left foot's my pivot foot. And I'm, ripping and going right. Like in America, like you can just kind of go and you kind of get this like little half step in between. Like in Europe, like you have to put that ball down before your pivot foot comes up or it's going to be a travel. So that was like something I had to get used to. And then I ran into Shammond Williams, who had an insane career in college, played in the NBA for a little bit and then played at some of the highest level in Europe. And he was showing me, just this like little jab step, move the ball and throw the ball down and move. And so we literally do that in practice because I thought it was such a good move, especially like when a ball screen's coming to like fake like you're using the ball screen, we call it the Shammond. So like we'll do a drill where we just call it the Shammond. So that's kind of a little side note, but that was the biggest thing from like the weight, like rules, I guess. The substitutions are different. Lane was a little bit different at the time. I know they changed that. Shot clock being 24 versus 35, but I loved the playing over there, and I didn't play at like the highest level, but it was still a great experience.
So I think it's also interesting. You talked about the footwork, right? And I don't know, maybe that helps players coming to the United States. What was the player development like over there? Like some of the things, maybe some of the differences. Because that's always talked about, right? The differences between European players and players from the United States.
Yeah, you can see it with the lower levels. Like these kids are just in whatever program from a young age. And so I think it's just emphasized more. And then the young talent, then they're playing professional earlier. They're playing at, 18, 19. Like they were laughing at me thinking, you played for free, your coach is making $1 million. Like, you're an idiot. Why would you do that? Like, the whole college model to them is like, is so bonkers. That one guy was telling me, he's like, I would key my coach's car every day if he made that amount of money, and I was making nothing. So I'm like, yeah, you can't do that in college. Yeah, Coach Williams. But there's just a couple things that were different.
All right, so I think now that the NFHS has come out with a shot clock, right? This is what we're asking.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, are you a shot clock guy or no shot clock guy?
I'm for it because I think it'll make coaches better. I feel like you have to be, more organized sooner. So I think it'll be a benefit. The teams that would have really good coaches that are prepared for it, it's gonna be good. And it's good for end of the game. I just hated end of the game in high school where it's like, teams are holding it.
Yeah.
2 minutes to start. Like, people have done the studies and they say like the shot clock won't really come into play throughout the first 3 quarters or whatnot, which I agree with. But yeah, end of quarters, end of games, I think it'll make it a much better product.
Sure.
So you just talked about it then. So how, if you're looking ahead, how do you kind of start preparing for it? How can you start incorporating some of those things to where it's not such a big a shock? Because I think probably at some point down the road where it's coming just about everywhere.
Obviously, I think you're going to have to get like end of clock situations into your system faster, whether it's a hand signal or a color call or boom, hey, we know we're in this. Same thing defensively. Okay, if we're under 5 seconds in the shot clock, hey, we're going to start switching everything. Like, every ball's like, hey, we're in red, and so whatever that may be. So offensively, defensively, you can do a couple things like that. I just think it's going to change things situationally, 2-for-1s. I've always been a big believer in that. I don't think a lot of coaches in college are that aware, or obviously they're aware, but I don't know how well they're teaching it. I think that's a thing that should be, utilized. But we probably won't do anything like that or play with a fake shot clock until the rule actually gets changed, and then we can have it.
So you kind of piqued my interest then. You talked about, and obviously it's probably more college and NBA, but you talk about, certain calls and things like that are automatics. Can you talk about how those were incorporated when you were in college and even pro ball?
So that was like the end of the shot clock was 1. We would, if it was under this, we would always switch like something late. But nowadays, you see, I feel like everybody's switching everything. So that's kind of changed. We had a fist call. It was just a simple single high ball screen. We would had a couple 1-4 low calls. It was nothing groundbreaking. So I'm trying to, that's kind of, it's not a great answer.
But it was just kind of automatics that you had worked into the offense and the flow.
Yeah,
you guys.
Stuff you would rep defensively too, like when you're going 5-on-5 half court, and then he'd stop and talk about, hey, realize the situation here, call it out, and so stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I think that's really good, because I think that's, based on how we've been playing, I don't think that's stuff a lot of people think about, that to have those kind of things. So that's really cool.
So I want to get into one more question before we go into our final 2 segments to wrap up. So I recently read a book, and I've asked about the last 7, 8, 9 guests on the show, and it's called The Tough Stuff by Cody Royal. And he talks about the imposter syndrome as a coach. So, for example, something goes wrong, you lose a game, you start to think like, man, am I really supposed to be the coach for this situation? Did I mess that up? Even when we played, if you missed a shot late, or if you messed up a scenario, or, when you were playing, let's say when you got to North Carolina, or even throughout your career at North Carolina, or into your coaching career, when you first started to be as a head coach, as you said, all those things to go into it. Did you ever feel like you kind of felt that imposter syndrome? And, we've had a lot of coaches say so far to this day they have it. So I'm just curious your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think everybody is always, oh, I'm doing it right. Are the kids enjoying it? Is there a better way to be doing this? Should we have had more success than and like, you say all these things, but then you like try to look back and you have it as a player, like, hey, I was McDonald's All-American and at North Carolina and started every game as a freshman, yet you're still thinking like, oh, am I good enough? And things like, I don't know if that's just a personal thing or just a human thing that people are always kind of negative or on edge. But I would have 100%, say that like thoughts like that have come through. And, we won the Catholic League last year, had an awesome year, so much fun, but it's like, all right, what, am I doing a good job here with this program, with these kids, with the next group? And then on top of it, if a kid transfers or a kid's not like, oh my God, what did I do wrong? Coaches always take that very, very personally. And so there's always thoughts like that. And I think it's good, I guess, a little bit to be on edge and to always want to be better and motivating and do the best you can for your kids. But at the same time, it's thinking about that a lot. It's tough sometimes.
So the first of our last two segments is, we call it the 30-second timeout. Your platform, open forum. You can tell a story. You can talk about something you've been looking into, a charity, an outside organization, kind of anything you want to talk about. It's a very loose 30 seconds, right? Like, the ref's not coming over and saying first horn here. But just kind of your forum to talk about something that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, like it said, it's on the questions you guys sent me, talked about an interest. Like probably 7 years ago, I really, really, really got into the game of golf. Like not just playing it, like reading about it, courses, architecture, logos. Like it's not a good thing. Like my buddies make fun of me and call me a golf nerd and all this stuff, but like, I don't know why. I love watching it. I love following it. Not even just PGA Tour. Like I know there's Corn Ferry events there in the Chicago area. Like I've gone down a very, very deep rabbit hole and have the golf bug bad right now. So if any coaches are out there that want to play this summer, hit me up. I'm always down to play.
Problem is, you're probably way better than I am. So I don't know if I'm going to say I'm not coming out to play you because I'm going to give you the.
I can't get better than an 8 index. I'm just like, I'll shoot in the low 80s like forever. I can never really get past that.
Yeah, that's way better than I can do, Coach.
Well, I can probably shoot 100. All right, so let's go to our last segment. This is a fun segment. We do it with everybody. We just call it quick hitters. So we're just going to ask you just some quick thoughts and some more fun questions. So first one is your favorite collegiate road stadium that you played in.
I mean, obviously I love Cameron because we went 4-0 there, but outside of that, I love the Palestra in Philly. I think that it was so old. It was so cool. That was probably my favorite place that we visited.
Favorite restaurant in Chapel Hill or that area?
Ooh, favorite restaurant in Chapel Hill.
Or just a general area, anywhere.
Yeah, no, Chapel Hill. I'll go Carburrito. It was like this lunch spot in the town over. They made really, really good burritos. Carburrito.
There you go.
All right, so now we got it to two-parter. So first of all, ketchup on a hot dog, yes or no? Second place, your favorite place to get a hot dog in the Chicago area?
So like originally, yes, when I was a kid, yes, I would put ketchup on there. Now that I've become more of a Chicagoan and know like what you're supposed to have on a Chicago dog, I'll not say no and act like I don't eat ketchup on a hot dog. Favorite place to get them from? I mean, I'm a huge White Sox fan. I always loved them at the games with the grilled onions and stuff on top. So I'll say that. Yeah. If I'm driving around, it's probably Portillo's or something like that. Okay. Even though Portillo's has changed since they sold out. I feel like it's the quality is not as good.
Agreed. I agree with that.
All right, so this is a two-parter question. All right, so best pickup game you had at UNC in terms of quality, like a game you were like, oh man, we were like getting after it. Mm-hmm. All right, and then the second one is like the most star-studded pickup game you had at UNC.
I remember going into my sophomore year feeling like, that's the best basketball I've ever played. Like I really had a pretty good freshman year, and then I was coming back, and I just remember that summer we would always play in the nights after camp with all the camp counselors were back. And I just remember hitting shots and just, Ty Lawson's here, and I know like he's obviously going to take my spot at some point, but I just felt like that was the most confident probably I've ever been. And I had foot injury my sophomore year, tore my ACL my junior year, so I never really got back to that level of confidence. So that's probably the most locked in, I guess, I was in pickup. But then as far as a star-studded one, there was I think 100-year anniversary right after I graduated, 100 years of Carolina basketball, and like they did a pickup game the night before, and it was like, everyone besides Mike, but like Antoine, Vince, you go down the list of all these Carolina guys that are out there playing, and it was just so cool to see that, and Stacks there, and to be around that is just really, really, really cool. And then to play it in the game in front of everybody the next day. Mike was there, as when he kissed Dean Smith on the head, and so there's just some fact that I'm in this photo, in the corner, this little white guy, and Michael Jordan's in the middle. It's just some really, really cool pictures from that event.
All right. So as you travel around, you've traveled throughout the United States and obviously throughout the world. So what's a stereotype or something ridiculous of Chicago or the U.S. if you want to talk, foreign, and that, you heard from people as you traveled either the U.S. or the world?
When I first got to North Carolina, like everyone thinks like Chicago's like everyone's a prick and nobody's nice, and I'm like come to Chicago, like people are super like hospitable here, and like so that was one thing that was I kind of try to squash that, because I'm also like the biggest Chicago's the greatest city in the world, blah blah blah, and like obviously we have our problems, but it still is a fantastic place. That's why I love living here and telling everybody about it. As far as the world goes, I mean, I was in Eastern Europe, and so we would travel we were in Serbia, we traveled some crazy places, and like you'd see some buildings that are torn down. They'd like be like, this is what you guys did, Bobby, like point to the Americans on the team, like telling us. I don't know, it's like half joking, half serious, things like that. But I don't think Americans are that loved. I think they love American culture. Like it was amazing, like East Bay magazine, like guys would like, but they heard my parents were coming over and they wanted to order all this stuff and have my parents bring it over. And like, it was like, that was crazy to me, like how much they love American culture, but I don't know if they love, Americans per se.
Did you get the last one? This is the first East Bay reference we've had on the podcast. Which,
yeah. East Bay's old school. East Bay was my favorite jam every month. You got that, and you're begging your mom. Come on, Mom. Did you get the Chicago accent thing too? You had to, right?
Yeah, I mean, I actually, when I moved back here, like I had a buddy that then came up and visited, and I was here for maybe a year or two, and he's like, "Oh man, your accent's got even worse since you moved back." I'm like, I lived in Bridgeport for years, so like you talk to some of those people,
right?
It's a Chicago accent. Like,
yeah, exactly. All right, so last one we got for you, Coach. PreGame playlist as a player, and then now as a coach. What's your go-to?
I was a big Eminem guy, and then weirdly, so I got into like soundtracks. Like there was one time I was listening to like Remember the Titans, like instrumentals. Like this is like on a 2007 iPod. So that was, I don't know why I did that, but that was maybe it was like I was reading maybe Mind Gym, or I was reading a book at the time talking about like maybe his meditation. So that was bizarre. But now as a coach, I don't really have a playlist. I at one season we ate at Chipotle on a game day and we like won. And so then I somehow like made it a thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was like, okay, I can't be doing this every game. Tuesday, Friday, it's getting a little much, but those are, I've always been a very superstitious person. I don't know why, and I know it's so dumb and none of it really matters, but it just makes you feel a little bit better before a game.
Well, Coach, we had a lot of fun with this episode. This was definitely one of our most fun episodes. There's some great stories, some great anecdotes. So we appreciate you being on and joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. It was fun.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast, hosted by Todd Zazadil and Jon Palicki. For more show content and upcoming episodes, follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout, or subscribe to our podcast for upcoming episodes. For show inquiries, you can email us at afterthetimeout@gmail.com. You can find all of our previous episodes on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Google Podcast, and Apple Podcast by searching After the Timeout. We appreciate you listening. Tune in next time for more basketball content on the court, off the court, and anything in between.